It was 2:30 a.m. on a quiet summer night in Salt Lake City, August 16, 1975. The streets were calm, the kind of silence you only hear when the city is asleep. Officer Bob Hayward had just clocked out of his shift and was heading home. His night was supposed to end uneventfully, but fate had other plans. As he turned into his neighborhood, his headlights caught a glimpse of something unusual, a Volkswagen Beetle gliding down the road with its lights off. At first glance, it didn't look threatening, just a small car moving quietly in the night. But Hayward knew his neighborhood. He knew who lived where, who drove what, and whose car belonged on which street. That Beetle didn't belong. He decided to follow. No sirens, no flashing lights, just quiet observation. The Beetle eventually slowed and stopped in front of a villa. Hayward instantly recognized the house. The owners weren't home that weekend. The only people inside were two teenage girls, 16 and 17 years old. Something didn't feel right. Hayward flicked on his headlights just to get a better look at the license plate. But that small move startled the Beetle's driver. Suddenly, the car roared back to life and tried to flee. Hayward didn't hesitate. The chase was on. For several minutes, the two cars darted through the sleeping streets until the Beetle finally gave up and rolled to a stop at an abandoned gas station. The door opened and out stepped a young man, hands raised in surrender. He smelled faintly of marijuana. He spoke calmly, almost too calmly, claiming to be a college student who had gotten lost after watching the new movie Skyscraper. It was a neat story, believable even. Except for one problem. Hayward knew the local theaters inside out. He had passed by the cinema earlier that night. Skyscraper wasn't playing. Suspicion grew. Hayward searched the car. Where the passenger seat should have been, he found an open bag filled with chilling tools, a ski mask, a crowbar, a coil of rope. In the trunk, handcuffs. These weren't the belongings of a lost student. These were the tools of a predator. Hayward arrested the man for possession of burglary tools, but in that moment, he couldn't prove more. There was no direct evidence of a crime, so the man, calm and composed, was soon released on bail. It wasn't a tea until much later that Hayward realized the truth. The man he had caught that night was not just a burglar. He was not just a liar. He was the man who would become America's most infamous serial killer, Ted Bundy. The 1970s and 80s were a chilling era in America. Serial killers weren't just on the news. They were part of the culture of fear. Names like Jeffrey Dahmer, John Wayne Gacy, and Charles Manson made headlines. But none fascinated and horrified the nation more than Theodore Robert Bundy. Bundy was the unthinkable predator, charming, articulate, and devastatingly deceptive. To the world, he looked like the boy next door. To his victims, he was death in disguise. Born on November 24, 1946, Bundy grew up in a working-class family. Outwardly, his childhood seemed normal, even happy. But behind closed doors, shadows were forming. At just 3 years old, Bundy was already displaying disturbing behaviors, laying kitchen knives around his sleeping aunt, catching small animals for cruel experiments. He showed no guilt, no remorse. His grandfather, a violent and abusive man, became a figure of admiration to young Ted. And while Bundy's intelligence and good looks earned him attention, inside he remained isolated, socially awkward, and deeply insecure. Schoolmates bullied him. Friendships eluded him. That lack of belonging created a void, one he would fill in the darkest of ways. By the time he reached college, Bundy crafted the perfect mask. Outwardly, he was the ambitious law student, the promising young man with a bright future. But underneath that polished image was a restless, growing hunger. He bought himself a brown Volkswagen Beetle. For him, it wasn't just transportation. It was freedom. It was a trap on wheels. On February 1st, 1974, Bundy's mask slipped completely. That night, he broke into the home of a young classmate. Her name was Linda. She would become his first known victim, and Linda would not be the last. Month after month, young women vanished. They were college students, babysitters, daughters, sisters, bright futures cut short in the blink of an eye. Bundy's method was chilling in its simplicity. He would fake an injury, wear a sling, or pretend to struggle with crutches. He would approach his victims in public spaces asking for help. His looks disarmed them. His charm convinced them. And once they stepped close enough, he struck. Unconscious, bound, and trapped in his beetle, they were driven to secluded locations. There, Bundy unleashed his darkest desires. For years, Bundy evaded capture. He wasn't just a predator, he was a performer. He played the part of the model citizen. He volunteered at hotlines for sexual assault victims. He wrote pamphlets advising women how to stay safe. The irony was cruel. But on November 8, 1974, Bundy made his first critical mistake. Her name was Carol Durant. She was just 18 years old when Bundy approached her in a shopping mall parking lot. He posed as a police officer, flashing a fake badge, claiming someone had tried to break into her car. Carol agreed to go with him, but as soon as she entered his beetle, she knew something was wrong. The smell of alcohol, the wrong kind of car, the uneasy silence. When Bundy snapped a pair of handcuffs onto her wrist, Carol fought back with everything she had. In a desperate struggle, she managed to escape, running into the night, screaming for help. Her bravery would become a turning point. She lived, and she remembered. Her testimony, paired with the suspicious beetle, connected Bundy to a string of disappearances. Eventually, the mask began to crack. Bundy was arrested in 1975, but this was only the beginning. What followed were escapes so daring they felt like movie scripts. He jumped from courthouse windows. He sawed through cell ceilings. Twice he slipped through the fingers of justice. And each time he escaped, more innocent lives were lost. In January 1978, he unleashed his most brutal attack at a Florida University sorority house. The scene was horrific. 2 young women murdered, several others assaulted. Just weeks later, he kidnapped 12-year-old Kimberly Leach. By then, America knew his name, and America wanted him stopped. On February 15, 1978, history repeated itself. Another patrol officer, another late-night drive, a beetle with no headlights, a suspicious car in a neighborhood it didn't belong. This time, there would be no escape. Bundy fought the officer, but he was overpowered and arrested. The evidence was overwhelming. His trial became a media spectacle, America's first televised serial killer case. People filled the courtroom, some even admiring him, seduced by his charisma. But the truth could no longer be hidden. On July 23, 1979, Ted Bundy was sentenced to death. He spent nearly a decade on death row. Days before his execution, he finally confessed to 36 murders. But investigators believe the real number could exceed 100. On January 24, 1989, the electric chair silenced Ted Bundy forever. Outside the prison, crowds cheered. For them, justice had finally been served. But Bundy's story is not just about one man. It's about an era when America realized that evil doesn't always look like a monster. Sometimes it looks like the boy next door. Sometimes it smiles, shakes your hand, and asks for help. And sometimes it drives a beetle with its headlights off.